to some extent, like you saw in Paris, you need to let 1,000 flowers bloom to get an agreement of this magnitude, and the same with the huge array of topics in the Sustainable Development Agenda. It is good to get a lot of learnings and initiatives off the ground. But now everybody, I think, is coming to the conclusion that we've done enough experiments and that time is running out, so that we need to aggregate for scale. So the first thing is, we need to get, especially the business community, that I think has to be a big part of this transformation with funds, technology, resources, etc. Get them aligned on the Sustainable Development Agenda, and that is what we are doing. We're currently in a major effort to get about 1,000 CEOs to internalize in their own companies the Sustainable Development Goals and their contributions. Absolutely key. The second thing is absolutely key is that we have science-based targets, that we really, and that we create the transparency around them. So companies that want to deal with climate change, science-based, publish it, the financial disclosure of climate-related risks. There is something about reporting and transparency that drives behavior. We shouldn't underestimate that. And the third thing we need to do is to change the boundaries that drive behavior. For example, if we don't value natural capital or social capital, businesses most likely will not internalize it. So a price on carbon for that reason is a very important thing. So I always say very simply, as long as we value a tree that's dead more than a tree that's alive, we're in trouble. And it really is the case. And so we need to put value on social and environmental capital. The World Business Council is working on a major project which is called Redefining Value. We have 200 companies aligned on that, increasingly more people. So coming to the land use and your question, one of the things we've seen is the whole food chain is pretty broken. If you would come from another planet to this Earth, you certainly wouldn't call us the most intelligent species. We have 800 million people going to bed hungry. We degrade the land like you wouldn't believe it. We cut the forest down as if it doesn't matter. Then you have 160 million people stunted. We disregard women in terms of land rights, access to financing or farming. Then we waste 30 to 40% of the food. And on the other side, we create the biggest epidemic that we've ever seen in mankind of diabetes 2 with obesity. Now, for the first time last year, more people dying of obesity than of malnutrition. So also that record we've beaten. So what we have said now is lots of great efforts happening in each of these individual areas. Nutrition for agriculture, scaling up nutrition, the 12.3, goal number 12, responsible consumption, 12.3, food waste, all the members, and 26 were looking at me and saying, you buddy, you are the problem. If we could get you out of the room, we wouldn't have to sit here in the first place. And that was basically the attitude. Then we get into, and obviously that changed quite dramatically and produced a very powerful document, which in the absence of global governance, in all fairness, is probably the only moral framework that we now have in the world, and I'll come back to that in a second. And we need to cling on this, and we need to see it in the perspective, when we talk here in these COPs as well, of the overall development goals. Otherwise we won't get there. It's the human, as Jennifer said, that has to be in the center of all of this, and obviously the people that aren't here, the people that are suffering from our inabilities or neglect, if you want to. And then Miguel comes along and really started something very powerful, because I remember the first COP I was involved in was in Cancun. And in order to stimulate Cancun, we rallied the consumer goods industry, and we said, well, let's do a commitment on deforestation, to not start selling products anymore that come from deforestation, difficult as it may be. Let's get into natural refrigerants for all these freezers and ice cream cabinets. And that was the first time that business came in and said, we're going to make some commitments, they still have to be done, but we're going to make some commitments to give the political environment a little bit more courage. And then I think it started to be accepted that the private sector and the non-state actors had to be part of this process. But it really got institutionalized in the Lima Paris Action Agenda, where we were meeting every night, and I was just in the restaurant again 3 weeks ago. But we were meeting every night to just debrief and steer, and Jennifer was there, and many of us, in terms of how could we make this agenda work. And that created such an energy from all of us non-state actors to be part of that. We all recognize as well that the political environment is very, very difficult. I wouldn't like to be a politician right now. So if we don't take this responsibility as human beings to de-risk that political process, it's not going to happen. That's why I'm sitting here. For the same reason as many of you, that have children or grandchildren. So I think that was a very strategic thing. The first lesson for me is we can decide our destiny. It's us together that decided the COP20. It's us together that decided the SDGs. And we can also decide how to do that. It's us together that decided that we need to get everybody involved, that this is a global agenda for everybody, not just for a few people in the government. It's a little bit of shame here that there is a distance again that has been created that I hope will really not be the norm, but perhaps the exception. Then we said the only way to get this transformation to happen in these key dates being obviously 2018, where we need to get the maximum ambitions, 2020, where we need the maximum peaking, 2030, where we need to implement the Sustainable Development Goals, and 2050, where we need to be at net zero. There's no question in these dates, and we should not actually allow anybody else to question that. That's why it's important in every effort that we do it science-based and get everybody fully base their discussions on that science itself. The biggest catalyzer, obviously, that I'm able to help with most is to show that this is a very attractive business proposition. Because if we can get the laws of economics to work, then really we'll see acceleration. After Paris, when the governments gave a clear signal that we were going to decarbonize the global economy, not enough, not a clear time frame, all the things we know, but a clear signal that we were going to decarbonize the global economy, the financial market started to get active. $34 trillion asking for a price on carbon. The divestiture movement, 2.6 trillion. The green bond market taking off. 1,400 companies having an internal price on carbon, etc., etc. So getting this clarity on this, but then you need to obviously have the right mechanisms in the financial market and obviously the real economy. So we created the Commission for Business and Sustainable Development under the leadership of Mark Malloch-Brown to look at the economic opportunity of the SDGs and the economic opportunity about climate change. We all talk about the cost of having climate change, but think about the economic opportunity of not having to deal with climate change. Talk about it positively also for the private sector to get involved. We found that opportunity to be, as a minimum, $12 trillion a year, and actually more in the low $20 trillion a year. 12 trillion was a low estimate by just looking at 4 sectors: land, energy, cities, and land, energy, and energy. Yeah. So we looked at 4 sectors and found 12 to 20 trillion dollars. Enormous opportunity that is galvanizing the business community. Where are we now? What do we need to do? I think 2 or 3 things that I've written down very quickly when I found out what the panel was about. The first thing is we do need to write down 10 things what this really means to what Jennifer says. People need to have a clear understanding that if we want to solve this issue, it means no combustion engine. It means no reforestation. It means no coal. What are the 10 things that it really means so that people can start figuring out what these tipping points are that we need to create? We should raise a sharp focus because time is ticking. The other thing that we need is common values. What is missing in this world is common values. You see that the political side. You cannot solve this by science. In fact, all the solutions are there already. You can only solve this with willpower and leadership. And that has to come from a common moral values. What are these moral values? First of all, putting the individual in the middle, the ones that can be here. So it's about respect and dignity. It's an understanding that the communities in which we need to operate and work need to function for us to function. It's an absolute must. Some people think in that sense that greed is good, but unfortunately it's over and over proven that generosity is a little bit better. And then the last value is want to think intergenerational. It really bothers me, and this is really why I'm getting always so passionate about it. It really bothers me that I'm part of that generation that has done more damage into this planet Earth in the last 50 years than we have done over the